The Chamber of Judgment was built to make visitors feel small. Its ceiling arched so high it vanished into shadow, supported by living pillars that pulsed faintly with bioluminescent veins. The floor was a mirror-black alloy, reflecting not faces, but heat and fear. At the far end sat the throne, vast, organic, grown rather than built, where the Alien Empress of the Valorix Dominion presided. Kneeling at the center of the chamber was a human. His name was Elias Ward. He was not a diplomat, not a general, not even a soldier anymore. His clothes were plain, his hands scarred, his posture steady but tired. Around him stood Valorix guards, towering, multi-limbed beings armored in crimson exoshells, weapons humming with restrained power. Humanity and the Valorix had been enemies for nearly 20 years. Worlds burned. Fleets shattered. Entire species chose sides or were erased. The Valorix believed humans were unpredictable, violent, and dangerously emotional. Humans believed the Valorix were conquerors without mercy. Today, Elias Ward stood alone before their Empress. Not as an enemy.
Not as an ally.
But as a question. The Empress leaned forward. Her form was tall and elegant, her skin a deep iridescent violet, eyes like molten gold. When she spoke, her voice carried through the chamber without amplification, calm, precise, and absolute. "Elias Ward of Earth," she said, "do you remember the girl you saved?" The question echoed. The guard stiffened. The advisors lining the chamber shifted uneasily. No one had expected that. Elias raised his head slowly. His eyes met the Empress's without fear. "Yes," he answered simply. "I remember her." A ripple of tension spread through the room. The Empress's gaze sharpened. "Tell me," she said, "why?" 23 years earlier, before the war had names and dates, Elias had been a civilian engineer stationed on Outpost K-17, remote mining colony near Valorix-controlled space. It was supposed to be neutral territory. It never stayed that way. The Valorix fleet arrived without warning. Not an invasion, just a resource acquisition, as they called it. Automated drones secured the area. Colonists were ordered to evacuate. Resistance was minimal and quickly crushed. Elias had been helping evacuate families when he heard the crying. It came from a collapsed maintenance tunnel near the reactor core. Everyone else was gone. Protocol said leave it, structural failure, radiation risk. But the crying didn't stop. He crawled inside, ignoring the Geiger warnings screaming in his visor. Deeper in the tunnel, pinned beneath fallen debris, was a small alien girl. She was Valorix. Her exoshell was cracked. One of her limbs was trapped. Her eyes were wide with terror. Elias froze. Every horror story he'd heard flooded his mind. Valorix children grew into warriors. "Kill her now," whispered fear. Instead, he remembered his sister. He cut power to the tunnel, used his tools to lift the debris inch by inch. It took nearly an hour. By the time he freed her, his radiation dose was lethal. He wrapped her in his jacket and carried her out. When Valorix soldiers arrived, weapons raised, Elias placed himself between them and the child. "She's hurt," he said. "She's just a kid." They stared at him as if he were insane. Eventually, a medic arrived and took the girl. Elias collapsed shortly after. He survived, but barely. His career ended that day. His body was never the same. He never learned her name. He never expected that choice to matter. Back in the judgment chamber, Elias finished speaking. Silence followed. The Empress rose from her throne. Many flinched. None spoke. "You knew she was Valorix," the Empress said. "An enemy by your people's definition." "She was a child," Elias replied. "That mattered more." "Even knowing your own life was at risk?" "Yes." The Empress descended the steps slowly, her gaze never leaving him. "That girl," she said, "was my daughter." The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Elias's breath caught, not in fear, but disbelief. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "I know," the Empress replied. "That is why this matters." She turned her court. That child was heir to the Valoric's dominion. At that time, our doctrine taught that compassion was weakness, that mercy toward enemies was a flaw. She looked back at Elias. "You shattered that belief." The Empress ordered the guards to stand down. Elias was allowed to rise. What followed was not a trial, but a conversation that would be recorded in Valoric's history for generations. "My daughter," the Empress said, "asked me once why the human did not kill her. I had no answer." Elias swallowed. "What did you tell her?" "That I did not know humans," the Empress said. "So I learned." Years passed. The girl, Princess Sailthra, grew up with that memory burned into her identity. While Valoric's culture glorified conquest, she asked questions. Why did humans fight so desperately? Why did they sacrifice themselves for strangers? Why did one human choose mercy over survival? She studied human history in secret. Their art, their stories, their contradictions. When the war began in earnest, she argued against total annihilation. She was ignored. Until she wasn't. The Empress gestured, and a holographic display filled the chamber. Battle statistics, casualty projections, economic collapse curves. "This war," she said, "will end in extinction for one of us. Or both." She looked directly at Elias. "My daughter believes another path exists. A path she learned from you." The middle years of the war were brutal. Human fleets adapted faster than expected. They fought not with superior technology, but with creativity, improvised tactics, suicidal gambits, refusal to surrender even when logic demanded it. The Valorics, for the first time in centuries, faced an enemy that would not break. Princess Sailthra rose through the ranks, not as a warrior, but as a strategist and diplomat. She studied human psychology, their resilience, their stubborn hope, and she asked for Elias Ward. It took years to find him. By then, Elias lived on a fringe world, repairing atmospheric processors and avoiding news of the war. When Valoric's emissaries arrived, he assumed it was his execution. Instead, he was escorted, under heavy guard, yes, but treated with respect. Now, standing before the Empress, he understood why. "My daughter believes," the Empress said, "that humanity's greatest weapon is not violence." Elias nodded slowly. "It's choice," he said. "We choose who we are, even when everything tells us not to." The Empress considered this. HFY, she said, unfamiliar with the phrase, but aware of its meaning through translation matrices. "Humanity. F asterisk asterisk asterisk. Yes." A faint smile curved her lips. The final decision came days later. Princess Sailthra entered the chamber, taller now, armored in ceremonial regalia, eyes reflecting both Valoric steel and something softer. She approached Elias and bowed. "I lived because of you," she said. "I rule because of what you taught me without knowing." Elias bowed in return, awkward but sincere. The Empress announced the armistice of twin stars, a ceasefire, followed by structured integration zones, cultural exchange, and shared defense pacts. There was resistance on both sides. Extremists attempted assassinations. Fleets refused orders. But something had shifted. Human commanders listened when Elias spoke. Valoric's generals listened when Sailthra did. Not because of authority, because of example.